Hi, welcome to Golden Years. I'm Lori Betts. This month we have Marie Edmonds. She is an estate lawyer and specialty is in elder care law. So come on back and we are going to tell you what's happening.
Hello, my name is Cindy Schneider and I'm the Executive Director of the Hands Foundation. We are a county-wide nonprofit dedicated to helping improve the quality of life for Medina County seniors. If you have any questions regarding any type of senior issues, please don't hesitate to call us at 216-780-4135 or visit our website at www.hands-foundation.org. Thank you.
You can't text and pay attention to the world around you, and you definitely can't text and drive. Every year, deaths due to distracted and negligent driving are increasing. In fact, while drunk driving rates have dropped greatly, negligent driving fatalities have skyrocketed. Find out more at negligentdriving.com.
Marie for joining me on my show this month.
Thanks for having me.
And we want to tell my seniors what's going on in the lawyer's world and what they need to know, issues that might be arising, because you see it every day.
I do. You know, most of my clients are elderly. I do a lot of estate planning, but my focus has kind of in the last couple of years turned into the elder law area. Because most of my clients tended to be asking those questions, or their children were asking those questions. So I would tell every client that comes in the door, we really have some basic things we talk about, which are their basic estate planning issues. So what I advise my clients is they always ought to consider making sure they have a will or that it's up to date, making sure that they have a power of attorney, and making sure they have their health care documents in place. You know, so often I see clients who really aren't too concerned about some of those things because they figure, well, I'm married, my husband can take care of everything, or my wife can take care of everything. And I hate to see a situation where they've kind of gotten caught where they don't have the right documents in place, and all of a sudden their spouse can't write their checks, or they can't sell their house or sell their stocks or make the right decisions because they haven't given them legally the right authority.
How often should a will be updated?
Well, I tell clients that they probably ought to look at them maybe every 5 years. And quite often they don't need to be updated, but you know, things change. If you look at where you were 10 years ago and where you are today, you know, things change pretty rapidly. So, you know, if there's some event that's changed, you know, you have, you're retiring, you have new grandchildren, you have a great increase or decrease in your estate size. Those are things that should trigger you to come in. Otherwise, when someone comes in every 5 years, we look at, do you still have the right executors named? Are the beneficiaries still how you want them? Is there anybody we need to add or remove? So it's a good thing to look at, because sometimes they get out of date pretty quickly.
Okay, and then issues do arise.
Most definitely, most definitely.
All right, so what advice can you give to Mrs. Jones? Okay, let's say they're going to downsize their house.
Right.
So they're going to get ready to sell the house. So they have to make sure a will is in place to see where the money's.
Right, and I think probably the most important thing is that power of attorney. You know, it's not unusual to have somebody, you know, be in the middle of some transaction, particularly an older person, and all of a sudden somebody has a stroke or somebody has some accident, and we're in the middle of trying to sell that house, and now who's going to sign the deed? You know, if you have not given someone the authority to sign your name for you, then we've got to go through a guardianship proceeding in the court, which is typically more complicated than you really need it to be. So if you give someone authority to handle those things for you, and hopefully you'll never need that, but if you do, we're going to make sure that all those transactions are easy, number one, and we don't have to go through any kind of court process. So I think that probably the power of attorney is one of the most important documents that I advise people to have in place, but with some cautions. You know, a power of attorney is a very powerful document. You know, you give someone authority typically to do anything that you can do financially. You know, so we want to be careful. If you've got any concerns about who you're naming, you know, we can kind of build in some safeguards. Maybe you need to have more than one person serve at once. Maybe, but there are things you can do. So, you know, when someone comes in to talk to me, it's not a matter of someone comes in and says, well, I think I need this, 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 and this. We really need to talk about, well, what's your family situation? You know, who are the people in your life that you trust to help you? Who do you feel that kind of a job wouldn't be overwhelming? Because sometimes, you know, we assume, well, my oldest child should do it. Well, maybe that's the worst person to pick.
Yeah.
You know, they're not really not capable, or it's going to be they're going to be overwhelmed by that because they've got 3 little children themselves, and what if something happens now? They're never going to be able to handle it. So those are the kind of issues we on kind of the basic estate planning level that we talk about.
So really, if there's a husband and wife, they really do need a third party to be the power?
I think so. Name each other first, and then always have a backup. Because you never know when something's going to happen.
Life can change in a heartbeat.
Quickly, and you know, and if it does, and you can't name someone, then we're kind of caught.
Yeah.
You know, so what I find is most clients come in, we talk about kind of the basic estate planning issues, but as soon as someone starts talking about, you know, they're concerned about going into a nursing home and having to spend all their money, and is there any way to protect it? Really, the focus of our planning shifts pretty dramatically. Because I think those are a whole different set of issues. And you know, whether you really need to be concerned about that financially or you don't, I find you are.
What is the look back now? How many years?
Well, it's a 5-year look back. So when someone makes a Medicaid application, they look back 5 years to see if you've given anything away. And if you have, they penalize you for a certain number of months depending on how much you gave away. So if you gave away, let's say, you know, $120,000 in 3 years ago, and you are qualifying for Medicaid now, they would basically, you would have a 20-month penalty period, because they take the $120,000 and they divide it by the average cost of a nursing home, which they say is $6,023 a month. It doesn't matter what you're actually paying. That's the number they use, and that comes up with a number, and that's the number of months going forward that you wouldn't qualify for Medicaid. So when people are doing Medicaid planning, the critical thing is not necessarily when you gave things away, but when you make your Medicaid application.
Okay.
It gets kind of complicated.
It's very complicated. So when a couple comes in to see you, is there a checklist that you start the interview with? Or?
Well, typically, if someone comes in and we know we're going to be talking about some of those nursing home, long-term care planning issues, I send them out a form ahead of time where they can kind of take their time to fill out kind of a little bit of medical history, where everybody is, what are they capable of doing, where their assets are, have you already given things away, so that I have that ahead of time before they come in. Then when they come in, I kind of have a sense of what they have, what we may be able to do before they even come in.
Yeah, because everyone's life is so busy. They probably don't, that's the furthest thing they want to do is think about their future.
Definitely.
So they don't want to plan ahead, but it's definitely, and if you have children, you want to make it easy on your children
too.
You
definitely do. You definitely do. Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting you should mention that. A lot of clients I find are hesitant to even sign wills because they think that's going to like hurry the process. Now they're going to have to need it quickly.
Yeah.
You know, it just makes things so much easier if you've got the simplest things done. So when you're gone, it's easy for your children. And that's really the motivating factor for 99% of the people that come in.
And then on the reverse side, a lot of people think, okay, if I have that third party sign for me, then they're going to think, they're going to take my money.
Right, for sure.
But as long as they're living, they do not have the power, right?
Well, that's what the power of attorney does, though. That's why you have to be careful, because a power of attorney really can give someone the authority to do anything that you can do. So you're careful who you give it to, sometimes when you give it, and sometimes if you want to limit that it only applies to this bank account or it only applies to this transaction, you can do that. So once again, it kind of depends on your circumstances and what you're in the middle of and who your families are before we advise to give it to a broad power to who. Are
there a lot of changes in your world as far as the laws?
Well, there are a lot of tax changes that from an estate tax standpoint. And then there are always Medicaid issues that kind of come up. So from an estate tax standpoint, you know, currently the federal exemption is $5 million. So that means each of us can leave $5 million to our families without there being any taxes. You know, for most of us, that really is never going to apply. Now that is scheduled to drop to $1 million by the end of the year if Congress does nothing, which I think they won't do anything before the elections. And you know, $1 million or $2 million for a couple may catch more people than $5 or $10 million does. You know, but really, most people were in the past more concerned about the Ohio estate tax, although the exemption was much lower, $338,333, and the tax rate was lower, 7%. It caught almost everybody. Thankfully, as of January 1st of 2013, there's no Ohio estate tax. So many people that would have paid something when there's a death probably won't pay anything. And well, that's kind of good. So that's the big change in the tax area. You know, in the Medicaid area, it's always a function of kind of keeping up on how the counties are interpreting some of the rules. Because those things are very different from county to county. And you know, with the federal deficit, the state deficits, you know, a large portion of the money is spent on Medicaid. So I think it's getting a little harder to qualify for Medicaid. But sometimes it really is important that someone qualifies.
How about the snowbirds? When they're half here for 6 months and half there for 6 months, it's good here and there if they have their will. Either state.
Oh, their will. It is. You know, if typically I tell someone, if you're really going to be a resident of another state, you probably ought to have an attorney in that state prepare those documents. But if you have one here and you move and you take it with you, 9 times out of 10, it's the same. The requirements are the same, and it's going to be honored, because the law says if you made a will that was good in Ohio and you move, it will be honored in another state. So that's also good to know. You don't always have to update everything.
That's got to be overwhelming.
Well, and that's what I find. And as we get older, as you know, I think more and more you're easily overwhelmed by all those things you have to worry about. You know, so what I tell clients when they come in is, you know, don't look ahead and try to make a decision today that's going to be good for now and 20 years from now, because that's unlikely. Think how things change. You just have to make the best decision you can for your circumstances now. Now, if things change, we can change it, but at least you're covered. Because sometimes, you know, we get that paralysis because it's got to be perfect. What's going to be perfect today may not be perfect in the future. So
is anything perfect?
Exactly. And we know one thing we're sure of is that things will change.
Definitely.
So
I did hear that comment yesterday that they said anything that's 100% sure in a nursing home is change.
I couldn't agree more. Couldn't agree more. So it's a very interesting area of the law, because although it looks like things, you know, your situation may be the same as mine, no two people's situations are the same. You know, we all have our own family dynamics that we bring to our planning, and it's really important that when you speak to your attorney that they kind of know who's who, what everyone's situations are, because we want to make sure that we plan to meet your particular goals. You know, if you're worried about a special needs child or a spendthrift child or whatever, you know, if you don't tell your attorney that, we can't plan around that, and we need to be able to do that. You know who you're comfortable with handling your money and who you love, but you really don't want them to handle things for you. Or, you know, you love your children, but you're worried about a certain daughter-in-law or a certain son-in-law. You know, we want to make sure that we don't put some pressure on the wrong person who's going to have some pressure put on them by someone else. So
it's a very good point.
Yeah, it's concerns that everybody has, which is another thing I think clients ought to be aware of. You know, somebody's uncomfortable sharing some of your family concerns. Every family has some concerns. Everyone does.
So when they pick up the phone and they make that phone call,
right,
it's not going to be a rushed appointment.
No.
You're going to take the time. You're going to sit with them and say, okay, what are your needs? What are your goals?
Right. And tell me about your family. You know, so, and what I tell them is, you tell me what you want to accomplish, and I'll help you get there. But I need to know what your concerns are. So once again, when we start talking about estate planning and making sure we have our will in place, and now the conversation shifts to long-term care planning and qualifying for Medicaid, now what we would do from a planning perspective is very, very different. So once again, we got to make sure we have that conversation that takes us there. So I know that, you know, are we worried about someone going in a nursing home and being on Medicaid maybe 5 years from now or 6 years from now, because we may have one kind of a plan? Or are we worried about someone that's already in a nursing home? You know, one of a couple's already there or going to be there soon. And, you know, because then the plan is a little different. And certainly I think one thing I think clients should know is, at least what I tell clients is, it's never too late to do something. You know, so often I hear it's too late, mom or dad are already in the nursing home. I know there's nothing we can do. That is not true. That's just not the case.
All right, hold on to that thought. We're going to take a quick break, and we're going to come back to Golden Years, and Marie is going to give us an update on why it's never too late.
Come on, let's go.
Hey, hi, what's your name? You live around here? You're pretty. Where are you guys going? Where are you going? Where are you going? Where are you going?
Guess it's about time to get you fixed, sweetie.
Your pets will start getting noticed sooner than you think. Accidental litters lead to millions killed in shelters each year. Help prevent more. Fix at month 4.
Scam artists are trying to trick seniors into giving them their Medicare number.
I heard that, and I did something about it. I joined the Senior Medicare Patrol, where I teach others to protect their Medicare numbers, review statements to spot false charges, and report fraud.
Welcome back. I'm interviewing Marie Edmonds, elder care lawyer in Medina County, and we left with her statement, "It is never too late." So zero in on that statement.
Okay. Once again, clients will come in, and I refer to this kind of as crisis planning. Let's say that it's a couple and one of the couple is already in a nursing home or going to be going in a nursing home soon, and they come in thinking, well, I'm sure there's nothing we can do now to preserve our assets because one of us is already in the nursing home. And once again, I will tell people that is not the case. It is never too late to do something. I mean, in a real generalization, if someone like that comes in, there are some things we can do where certain assets that you own are exempt and they're not going to count them. Like your home, for example, as long as one of the couple is living there, that is exempt. Medicaid doesn't count that. But your other assets, I would tell you that we probably can help you save at least half of those, no matter if you're in the nursing home or going into the nursing home soon. And you may have to spend the other half, but honestly, never too late. It's just a matter of what's the best way to get you as quickly as possible on some government benefits if we're kind of close and we're able to do that. Okay. So you don't need 5 years, is what I'm telling you.
And you made the comment that it's all different dynamics in families and whatnot. Yes. There's different personalities. Okay, let's say Mr. and Mrs. Jones did their will. Okay, a child, a suspicious child gets involved. But you abide by the Privacy Act, correct?
Exactly.
So the children cannot get involved unless they have their okay.
Exactly. So as attorneys, we have an ethical obligation to serve only our clients, and attorney-client privilege. I can't disclose anything my clients say, nor can I disclose who my clients are. So if mom and dad did a will, and then the daughter calls and says, well, I need a copy of that. So I can't give you anything unless mom or dad calls in and says I can give you a copy. I can't tell you anything. I can't give you anything. Number one. Number two, it's also important, I think, particularly as we get older, that I meet with my clients by themselves. Sometimes a child or a friend brings my client to my office, because I have some older people. They are not in our meetings. They're not in our meetings.
Okay.
I need to hear from mom and dad what they want to do. Because the argument can always be made. You come in with your daughter, and you're changing your will, and somehow that daughter is getting some favored treatment. Now, maybe that's exactly what you want to do. But if the daughter's sitting there, the argument can be made by someone else down the road. Well, she unduly influenced you to do what you did. You're kind of under her thumb. You're afraid to do something other than that. We don't ever want that to be the case. So I always need to hear it from mom or dad by themselves what they want to have done. And they can, I tell people, you can do whatever you want. There's no law that says if you have 3 children, it's got to be equally among the 3 of them. Not the case. You can do whatever you choose, but we don't want someone in that meeting, one of those kids in that meeting.
Yeah.
So,
Well, that's
very
understandable.
important. Yeah.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
Because one child might have one or a little bit more power over mom and dad than the
Definitely.
other one.
And as we get older, I think we get more vulnerable to those situations. If you're living with one of your children, you become so dependent on them that sometimes, what they think is what you think. So, even when I get to the long-term care planning issues, I quite often do speak with children to help get that in place, but I always have to still speak to mom and dad, because we want to make sure that we're planning the way they want things to be done. So, and I think an important, going back to the long-term care planning issues, when we get into that planning, I think the most important thing for clients to understand is that kind of planning more times than not involves giving things away. So you've got to be ready to do that. If you're not ready to give up control, then we're not where we need to be. I mean, I've sat in meetings where I've had a mom, dad is ill, so he's not there, and 1 or 2 of their children are with it, and we kind of go through the plan that involves some gifting, and it all sounds great. Everybody's kind of all on the same page. The sons are nodding their head. That's great. The end of the meeting, mom stands up and said, "We're not going to do that. I'm not ready to do that. I'm not ready to give up control." That's not my choice. All I can do is tell you what your options are. If you're not ready to give up some control, because that's what it's going to mean, then that's not where you need to go. So.
And a lot of seniors have that problem. They're afraid if they sign on that dotted line and give it away, that they'll be homeless.
I know. And some of that is very well-founded fears. And I can't make you not be afraid of something. If that's what your concern is, then we either aren't going to do that, or we're going to make a plan that will protect you, even if you do have to give up some control. So there are certainly things you can do from a planning perspective. But once again, who's my client? My client is mom, dad. It's not the son or the daughter that brought somebody in. So I think that's important for clients to know.
So any client could call you up and just say, you know what, I have a question. Can you help me through this question? Or can they email you back and forth?
Right, exactly. Usually when someone calls in and needs to kind of have some advice, I prefer that people come into the office, because it's really hard to give advice over the phone without, go back to how do I start my interviews. I like to have some information, and I like to get a feel for who you are, what your family dynamics are. That's hard to do over the phone.
Right.
So although I can answer a question over the phone, and certainly people can email me, that's not a problem at all. It's easier if you come in first and we kind of have a conversation, and then going forward, either you're going to decide what you want to do, you need to think about it, I'll give you some information to take home with you, I'll write you a letter and summarize what we've talked about, and then if you want to call or email, it's just easier to address the right questions. So sometimes I'll have people come in and say, I don't even know what to ask you. How do I know what I should be concerned about? Well, you know what you're worried about. I can tell you, once you say that, I can say, well, now, here are some options of things you can do. Some you may like, some you may not. There's a real spectrum of giving up a little control, giving up a lot of control. Whether even back to the basic estate planning, should I do a will versus should I do something like a revocable trust? Well, I need to hear about what your family situation is. It's not just about dollars. It's not about how much it is. It's really about what you're concerned about and what your family situation is.
Very good. And like you said, I'm sure a lot of people, they call you up and they're they don't know what to ask.
Right.
Or where do I begin?
Exactly.
Because if they have not done it years ago and this is all new, fresh for them, they need to know what to ask.
Right, right. And I think sometimes that first meeting is also a function of us going through, okay, if we're going to do this kind of planning, here are the decisions you're going to need to make. You may be able to make them while you're sitting across the table from me. Otherwise, you may have to go home and think about it. You know, I think one of the most important and difficult issues for clients are, who do I want to be in charge? You know, whether that's an agent under a power of attorney, executor under my will, trustee under my trust. You know, it sounds like an easy choice, but it's not always an easy choice. You know, either it's not. It may be one or more of your children, or not, or someone who doesn't have children. You know, who are they going to trust to handle things for them if they're at some point alive but not able to handle them? Whether that's medical decisions, financial decisions, and then when they're gone, who do they trust to handle things for them? I think it's a much more difficult decision for people that don't have children.
Yeah, definitely.
You know, so we try to identify, here's the things you need to think about. You may be able to tell me today what your decisions are, or you may need to go home and think about it. But these are things, no matter what we do, you're going to have to decide.
In your comment when you said make sure you choose the right person, I mean, I have children coming into the store, and they're like, oh my God, Mom and Dad, they're depending on me now. And it's just like a light bulb went on in her life because she's so busy doing her life.
Yes.
Then all of a sudden Mom needs them more seriously.
Right.
And she's like, I don't know if I can handle this part of it.
I know. And I think children have to be very honest with their parents. I mean, you know, obviously if you're the only child, I think it's going to be you.
Right, yeah.
You know, but if you've got siblings and there's some people that are close, well, what I see, what works well, and maybe you do as well, you know, kind of share some of those duties. You know, somebody may be the one, you know, I trust this child to take care of me, and I trust this child to help me with the medical decisions.
Divide.
But this is the one who's going to handle the money. You know, number one, you've got everybody involved, but you also may have the right people doing the right thing, because if one person has to do everything,
it's overwhelming.
Overwhelming. And like you say, you know, children, we're all busy. Everybody's busy. Kids are busy. And, you know, some of them don't even have the luxury of having children live near us. You know,
Oh, yeah, a lot
you've
of
got the distant
out-of-towners.
relatives. You know, then who do you count on? You know, you can still have some distant relative of even a child. When I mean distance, I mean a distance away, not a distance from your family. Handle money and so forth. But who's going to do the day-to-day things? You know, those are the kind of conversations I think that we have with clients, so that they know, here are the people you need to start getting your team in place. Because somewhere down the road, you're going to depend on somebody.
And a big key is, whoever you choose, they have to have patience.
Oh, yes.
Because if you don't have the patience to help Mom and Dad out,
Right.
that could be a major roadblock.
I agree. Which is interesting, because Mom and Dad may think you're the right one.
Yeah.
And it may be just the worst time in the world for you.
Exactly.
You're in the middle of something else. So, you know, once, you know, not only do Mom and Dad need to think about it, we need to get the kids sometimes involved and say, really, are they the right person? Number one. Or number two, maybe you ought to think about naming an alternate, so that if at the time someone's called to serve, if it's not good, then they can defer to the next person.
Oh, you can do that.
Right. So you don't have to have the perfect person. It's going to be you, come hell or high water. You know, it's you if it works for you. If for some reason it's not going to be good for you, let's have a second person, so that you can say, you know, now it's not good. I'm going to let it go to the next one in line.
You are a wealth of information.
I love what I do. This,
I
you know,
can
this is
tell.
all that I
can
do.
tell.
I only do estate planning and the elder law, long-term care planning, so that's it. So I try to keep very up to date on that, and I love what I do.
And you have the personality and the caring to help people.
Well, thank you. Thank you.
Thanks for joining us this month. And if you have any questions for Marie, please email her at marie@marieedmonds.com. And if you have any questions for me, Lori, please call me at GTB Medical, 330-225-2551. If you have any interest for any shows, any concerns, or any topics you would like me to interview, please give me your suggestions. And we'll see you next month.